Well, welcome back. And the Middle East indeed is filled with many flashpoints from the east to the north, and definitely many of the enormous developments and challenges that took place during the year 2025. We now welcome Ambassador Hisham Youssef, Senior Advisor at the European Institute of Peace, who's joining us here from Cairo, and he will provide expert analysis on the Middle East 2025 political shifts, regional security, and diplomatic developments. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to this Qnews recap. Let me start by asking you, what were the main political security transformations that defined the Middle East in 2025?
Well, thank you for having me. I think 2025 has been a very difficult year for our region across the board in all kinds of places. Let me say a sentence or two on each of the conflicts that we are facing. Of course, the first is the situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Although the year started with a ceasefire, it was violated by Israel, and the war continued until October, where an agreement was reached, but we don't see a ceasefire as such, because Palestinians are being killed every day. We have seen starvation, we have seen all kinds of difficulties, and from what we see, the situation will probably become much more difficult before it becomes easier. Then if we go to another file, the situation in Lebanon. Lebanon also was devastated by a war from Israel and devastated the situation in Lebanon as well. The situation in Syria has its ups and its downs. We have seen some positive developments in relation to the change of the Bashar al-Assad regime, but we have also seen military attacks by Israel on Syria that was uncalled for, and since Syria does not constitute any threat to the situation in Israel at this point in time. We've also seen the situation in Yemen getting much worse, one of the worst humanitarian situations in the world. And also in the last few days, the situation has deteriorated further by military confrontations and challenges as well. Going to Sudan, the situation in Sudan also is one of the worst humanitarian situations on earth, and 2025 witnessed all kinds of crimes and wars against, violations against international law, and the situation also is not improving. Situation in Libya also, we haven't seen any positive developments in relation to advancing the situation in Libya. And finally, we've also seen an attack by both Israel and the United States on Iran, destabilizing the region as well. So we can't say that things have seen any significant positive results on all kinds of fronts in the region in 2025.
Indeed. Your Excellency, here, if I may take some flashpoints to every file here, particularly when we speak about Gaza. Now, the post-war situation in Gaza, do you think it influenced regional and international diplomatic priorities? How do you assess the Gaza situation, particularly after the ceasefire agreement?
Well, I can't say that we are in a post-war period. As I mentioned, we have Palestinians being killed every single day until today. And what we have seen in the summit that took place between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, it seems that President Trump is not worried about the continuation of such situation with the Palestinians being killed. Also, the humanitarian situation is catastrophic, despite the fact that the military confrontation has diminished somewhat. But still, people are not finding food, medicine, water, and fuel, and so on. So the situation remains dire, but then we don't see a position from the United States that reflects the urgency of the needs and the requirements of the Palestinians in Gaza. And the West Bank also has not received the attention that it deserves, while also the situation in the West Bank has been devastated. On the other hand, we see also that there are people across the world still demonstrating, and saying that the situation in Gaza is untenable and that the world has to be much more forceful in relation to addressing this situation and putting pressure on Israel in order to change its policies.
Indeed. Indeed, we thank you so much, Ambassador Hisham Youssef, Senior Advisor at the European Institute of Peace from Cairo. Thank you so much for sharing your insights here. Very quick analysis, and we definitely had lots of flashpoints in the Middle East, but the Middle East evolving political landscape and regional security challenges in 2025 are still on, and we appreciate so much your expertise on Qnews on 2025 recap. In 2025, also Sudan descended deeper into war, hunger and displacement, becoming the world's worst humanitarian crisis. As cities collapsed, civilians paid the price. Regional powers moved diplomatically, and hopes for peace struggled to survive amid relentless violence and political collapse that defined the year regionally.
Sudan's crisis deepened dramatically in 2025, marking one of the darkest chapters in the country's modern history. Nearly 2.5 years after fighting erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces, the war has evolved into what aid agencies describe as the world's largest humanitarian catastrophe. The conflict, which began in April 2023, has killed more than 150,000 people and displaced over 14 million inside Sudan and across its borders. Entire neighborhoods have been flattened, basic services have collapsed, and famine has spread across wide parts of the country. Nowhere has the suffering been more severe than Darfur, especially the city of El Fasher, which fell to the RSF in late October 2025 after an 18-month siege. The fall of El Fasher triggered reports of mass killings, executions, and the destruction of displacement camps. Satellite imagery and humanitarian assessments pointed to mass graves, flooded shelters, and the breakdown of what little medical capacity remained. The United Nations declared famine conditions in El Fasher and other areas, warning that hundreds of thousands of civilians were trapped with little food, water, or protection. The roots of the war lie in Sudan's fragile transition after the 2019 overthrow of Omar al-Bashir. Hopes for civilian rule unraveled after the 2021 coup, led by Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and RSF Commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hamiti. Their power struggle over military integration and political control ultimately erupted into open warfare. Throughout 2025, fighting intensified across Darfur, Khartoum, Kordofan, and Gezira State. Drone attacks struck airports and civilian sites. Humanitarian access was repeatedly blocked, and aid workers warned the crisis was spiraling beyond control. Amid this devastation, Egypt emerged as one of the most active regional actors seeking to contain the conflict. Cairo stepped up diplomacy through bilateral engagement, regional coordination, and international mediation, repeatedly calling for an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian corridors, and a political solution that preserves Sudan's unity and sovereignty. Egypt also played a central role within the Sudan Quad alongside the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, pushing for a humanitarian truce as a pathway toward a permanent ceasefire. Despite sanctions, investigations, and multiple ceasefire proposals, the war remains unresolved. Still, diplomatic momentum has grown in recent months, with renewed discussions on humanitarian pauses and political negotiations. As Sudan endures one of the gravest crises of our time, Egypt says it will continue working with regional and international partners to ease suffering, support stability, and help chart a path back to peace.
Indeed, the Sudanese crisis is described by the world as the worst in the whole world. Let me here welcome Mr. Rami Zuhdi, African affairs expert, who's joining us live from Cairo, and he will be shedding light on Sudan's escalating crisis, the humanitarian catastrophe, and regional diplomatic efforts. So good evening to you, and let me start by asking, what are the main factors that have driven Sudan's conflict to escalate so dramatically in 2025?
Actually, here the conflict got worse by the end of 2025. Around 1,000 days from the war has started, but it actually ignited out of nowhere gradually. It is because of lots of reasons that escalated the war and for us to reach where we are right now. And one of these reasons is just a broad political horizon. There were no negotiations between the or both sides, and there weren't any efforts to reach real negotiations. And then also another reason is the having the war just in a small area like El Khartoum, for example, but it moved on to other states like Darfur, Kurdistan, and so on. And then also they were using this kind of ethnic dialogue to support the factions or to support the RSF. And then also there were there was support for the factions here. And then the last reason also is because of an economic collapse and not having the basic necessities. And of course this increased the war and made things more complicated.
Indeed, and we've also seen the Darfur, what happened in Darfur and what happened also in Al Fasher, which were definitely very grave incidents that took place. How effective have international organizations been in responding to the famine and displacement in Sudan after crises?
Actually, international response and the supporting institutions were actually not enough for the humanitarian crisis that the people are facing. And now we are facing in Sudan one of the worst humanitarian situations. And so, as I just told you, the humanitarian aid was nowhere near enough, actually. And there were some things that affected the delivery of humanitarian aid, of course, which is not being able to access the aid because of the war and the strikes and so on. And so this is why aid was distributed unevenly. And then also something else that of course affected this is the aid workers couldn't actually reach the areas where they needed to go, and the food as well. The aid wasn't just distributed unconditionally. And then the third reason here is a funding shortfall from lots of countries. There weren't enough funding that can actually save the people that were facing such a crisis. But of course, some institutions and organizations here that follow the UN, of course, had such an effective role in helping the Sudanese.
Right, if I may turn here to the Egyptian role, which has had a tremendous effect on the situation in Sudan, or the developments in Sudan. How has Egypt's clear commitment to Sudan's sovereignty and territorial integrity shaped its mediation role, and how influential has this stance been in the region?
Been very clear. And they were clear from the very first day. They want to protect Sudan and keep it as a whole. Egypt has refused any factions to have arms except for the government. They didn't want to divide the country. And of course here Egypt was a key player and a very important mediator here because they didn't intervene in the country's willingness or intervened in their internal affairs. They actually just supported them and refused any division or anything that would harm the country's sovereignty. And just respecting the government and not having any other factions have um, arms, and then also starting some kind of a committee in Sudan that can actually help both sides here to reach a resolution and to reach a ceasefire. And then Egypt has also refused any international interventions that supported war or a worse situation than the one we are in.
Mrs. Zori, if I may ask you here, Sudan's crisis, from your point of view, how it impacts broader regional stability, particularly in the Horn of Africa and North Africa?
Sudan is an important country here in the region and internationally, and so it is just not Sudan's issue. It is the reason of regional instability here. There is a regional spillover, and so a lot of countries are affected by this now, like the countries in of Africa. And so, and here actually things have been escalating. We've seen just illegal arms trafficking and even creating more factions, and so this causes the neighboring countries to actually be more fragile. And they have been already suffering because of Sudan's conflict. Lots of countries have actually been affected, and then also we've seen mass displacement to Egypt and Libya, and terrorism is just always there in Sudan. And then also they've been pushing the Red Sea security, which is very important here when it comes to maritime trade. And so here we can say that war isn't just about Sudan now. It is actually affecting the countries in the region and internationally.
Right, if I may ask you here, Mr. Zohdi, if I may ask you here, do you think that the Sudanese crisis or the instability inside Sudan could really spill over to other or neighboring countries in the Horn of Africa, in the north of Africa? And how would that issue, particularly the Sudanese instability, reflect on other important files also in the African continent?
Yeah, Sudan's instability and continuing the war for so long could actually affect the stability of the neighboring countries and the neighboring countries of those countries, just reaching the Horn of Africa. Of course, the mass displacement and is very important here and is affecting the other countries. And Sudan was a link here between lots of countries, and then also several wars can actually move on from Sudan to other neighbor countries as well. And these factions, these armed factions, not just the RSF, but of course especially the RSF, they could move on to other neighboring countries if the Sudanese army pushes them to. And so, yeah, such factions can actually move to neighboring countries and could cause lots of problems in the region.
Right, we thank you so much, Mr. Rami Zohdi, African affairs expert from Cairo, for your insights here and for your analysis that helped us better understand Sudan's crisis, the humanitarian challenges, and the critical role of regional diplomacy. We appreciate your time and expertise here on Qnews 2025 recap. And I guess that wraps up our Qnews 2025 recap on the Middle East and Sudan. We've explained conflicts, humanitarian crises, and shifting regional dynamics. And we hope 2026 would bring better developments for the Middle East and African continent at large. We thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates and continued coverages with experts, analysis and updates on the region navigates the challenges and opportunities ahead. Many thanks for watching.